The president has had a very busy weekend, making our country and the world a much safer place. President Trump ordered decisive military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. These Houthi terrorists have engaged in piracy, violence, and terrorism against American ships for years under the Biden administration, costing billions of dollars and putting innocent lives at risk. Joe Biden's pathetic weakness invited these unacceptable attacks. But there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Donald Trump.
Jesus Christ.
And the world is officially on notice. America has a commander-in-chief whose peace-through-strength approach is unwavering and should not be tested. As the president said, no terrorist force will stop American commercial and naval vessels from freely sailing throughout the world. Houthi terrorists and their Iranian backers should not cross President Trump again, and the president has made that clear today. On another important matter, President Trump signed a proclamation invoking the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by the foreign terrorist organization Trena. At the president's direction, the Department of Homeland Security carried out a counter-terrorism operation deporting nearly 200 violent Trena terrorists, which will save
These people were not proven in court to be members of Tren de Aragua, of course. We literally have like innocent people who have been sent to a super prison in El Salvador. They suspended habeas corpus.
Countless American lives.
Had a well choreographed, like planned propaganda video ready for them when they arrived in El Salvador.
To the great work of the Department of State, these heinous monsters were extracted and removed to El Salvador, where they will no longer be able to pose any threats to the American public. Tren de Aragua is one of the most ruthless terrorist gangs in the world.
Misspoke.
And they are responsible for some of the most heinous crimes that have occurred in our nation's history in recent years, including the savage murders of beautiful Laken Riley and Jocelyn Nungray. President Trump promised Laken and Jocelyn's families during his campaign that he would demand justice for their beautiful girls, and that's exactly what he did.
Beautiful. We pretty much dropped the pretense that this has anything to do with like immigration as a legal device, and it's entirely about white supremacy. So the narrative of like evil, ugly, despicable, monstrous brown or black person murders beautiful white woman. It's like it's the criminality of the act isn't the point. The point is the degeneracy of the act, right? Like the legalist might be concerned with murder, which is reasonable. I've been told murder is bad. But the fascist loves murder. So instead it has to be like something ugly soiled something beautiful.
As the president acknowledged during his inaugural address on January 20th, he pledged to invoke this act. And he has no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions. President Trump will continue his historic efforts to seal the border and prevent these illegal invaders from coming here in the first place. As the New York Times is acknowledged over the weekend, President Trump's policies are working. Here's how the Times summed it up. Illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border are down to their lowest level in decades. Once crowded migrant shelters are empty. Instead of heading north, people stranded in Mexico are starting to return home in bigger numbers. The border is almost unrecognizable.
Any other New York Times headlines describing the effects of Trump's policies that you want to share with the class, or only this one? Immigration or crossings have been going down for a while. Towards the end of Biden's administration, they were really, really low.
From just a couple of years ago, when hundreds of thousands of people from around the world were crossing into the United States every month in scenes of chaos and upheaval. This is the Trump effect in action. And again, those are the words from the New York Times. We didn't need a border security bill. We just needed President Trump. All of these actions taken together are contributing to a wave of optimism about the direction of our great country. According to brand new polling from NBC News, more registered voters say the United States is heading in the right direction than at any point since early 2004.
This is not only a lie, I think this is like the exact opposite of the truth. Like an enormous number of people think we're on the wrong track, and Trump's approval ratings are... Okay, The reason it says Trump ties for highest approval rating he's ever had is because they're comparing it to his first term. And Trump's approval rating was higher at the beginning of his second term, and they've been going down. So basically, they started at 51 for his first term. They started at like 56 for this term, and they've gone down rapidly for this term. So basically, they're saying we've now reached the high point of the last administration. There's a reason they phrased it this way. Though even the way they phrased it is dishonest. But, I mean, not that it matters. You can just lie.
Americans support President Trump's common sense approach that's getting our country.
Also, I should note, by the way, that while what we're seeing right now is despicable, it is also despicable that the Democrats refuse to implement any of these popular strategies for promoting their message. The press secretary should not only be a person whose job it is to answer press questions, but also a person to tout the achievements of their administration. Obviously, in this case, the achievements are being Hitler. It's just crazy that Democrats never did this. Not that they would have much to brag about, I guess, but...
back on track in record time. Meanwhile, the president's critics can't say the same. That same new NBC poll also found that the Democrat Party has reached an all-time low in popularity. It turns out when you let your hatred of President Trump get in the way of doing what is best for America, the people reject you.
To put this to a point of comparison, it was Democratic policy to not even say Trump's name when they talked about the effects of the administration, even if they were asked directly about him. They would say the former president. It's just remarkable how, averse to conflict the Democrats are.
Who would have thought? Joining us today in our new media seat is Kelly Meyer. She is a White House correspondent with News Nation. News Nation started in 2021 and is one of America's fastest growing cable news networks with a focus on news for all of America. It's part of a larger ecosystem,
2021,
Nexstar, which is home to News Nation, the political website The Hill, the broadcast network The CW, and local Nexstar stations. With that, kick us off, please, Kelly.
Thank you, Caroline. What do you say to Americans who want safe streets but are concerned due process is being violated?
The president is using every lever of his executive authority and his constitutional authority within the bounds of the immigration laws of our country to ensure that our streets are safer for law-abiding American citizens. And this administration is focused on detaining, arresting, and deporting illegal criminal aliens. And as you saw this past weekend, the president used his authority under the Alien Enemies Act to deport foreign terrorists. Tren de Aragua is now a designated foreign terrorist organization.
It really makes you wonder why they never got rid of the Alien Enemies Act, which is like an insane act to have still on the books in the United States.
And as I said, there were nearly 200 Tren de Aragua members who were sent to El Salvador this weekend.
Again, really important. They suspended habeas corpus. If these people were actually members of Tren de Aragua, then the administration would legally be able to deport them anyway. You can do that. If you have members of a foreign terrorist organization in your country that you've already arrested for being undocumented, you can already deport. You don't need the Alien Enemies Act. The reason they invoked the Alien Enemies Act is so they wouldn't have to prove it in court. They could suspend habeas corpus.
Countless lives will be saved because of this action. And if you talk to the families, the Angel families, as I mentioned, Blake and Riley and Jocelyn Nungray, they understand the grave cost of life at the hands of these illegal terrorists. And the president is proud to deliver on that promise for them.
And just to follow up on that, this will be challenged later today in the courts. Does the president, does this allow him to defy the court order without having this the checks and balances and the separation of power?
No. In fact, this administration acted within the confines of the law, again, within the president's constitutional authority. And
remember, they were deported in violation of a judge's order that they not be deported. And when the judge ordered the planes carrying them to El Salvador be turned around, Bukele, the president of El Salvador, quote tweeted it saying, "Womp womp," and that got retweeted by Marco Rubio.
Under the authority granted to him under the Alien Enemies Act. We are quite confident in that, and we are wholly confident that we are going to win this case in court. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. If you guys can't send 200 Tren de Aragua terrorists at a time to El Salvador, where are you going to send them instead?
It's a very good question.
What?
You'd have to ask the courts and the people on the left who are trying to fight this administration for doing the business that this president sought out to do, which is to deport these foreign terrorists. And we're very grateful to President Bukele and to El Salvador for accepting these heinous monsters where they will face justice.
And
Presumably that was a vetted question, but I feel like they didn't land properly. Like the point of the question was like, if we're not allowed to send these terrorists to El Salvador, what are we supposed to do with them? Let them live in our daughter's bedrooms? And then that was like Carolyn Levitt's prompt to say what she said, but he kind of undersold the question. I don't really know.
if these guys are terrorists at war with the United States, is President Trump considering anything more lethal to address them?
Yeah, I think these were setup questions.
Just sticking them on a plane somewhere else.
Well, it sounded like you had a little bit of curiosity in the premise of your
I know. You're wondering, like, are we gonna shoot them? Are we gonna have public death penalty and public executions? And you little scamp, you.
question, so I want to address it. These are designated foreign terrorists. The president signed a proclamation on February 20th, 2025, designating TDA as a foreign terrorist organization that was in consultation with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Treasury. That was pursuant to 8 U.S. Code 1189. The president has the right to do that, and I think nobody would argue that Tren de Aragua should be designated a foreign terrorist organization. If you want to have that argument, I'm happy to do it. These are heinous monsters.
Did she mean to say nobody would argue against that?
Rapists, murderers, kidnappers, sexual assaulters, predators who have no right to be in this country, and they must.
If only these things were proven in court. Well, they were for some of them. I mean, some of those people were members of Tren de Aragua. It's just that, that's what happens when you suspend due process. You kind of lose the ability to, verify or legitimize these claims long term.
Must be held accountable.
That's the point.
And something different. There is now
Three
a member
questions.
of the European Parliament from France who does not think the U.S. represents the values of the Statue of Liberty anymore. They want the Statue of Liberty back.
Yeah, this guy 100% had his questions vetted and approved. He's literally sitting front and center, and he's been given 3 questions in a row. I think they should just give him the entire. Why have anyone else in the room?
So is President Trump going to send the Statue of Liberty back?
Let's see, this is. I'm in North Korea now, man. I feel like I could genuinely be like a Chinese citizen and see Chinese Communist Party members get subjected to a little bit more scrutiny than this. I'm not kidding when I say that.
To France.
Absolutely not. And my advice to that unnamed low-level French politician would be to remind them that it's only because of the United States of America that the French are not speaking German right now. So they should be very grateful to our great country. Kelly.
It's kind of contradictory to the. You're going to make your 30% of Trump supporters angry because they think the wrong side won the war.
To give the court what it wants in terms of the time of the flights that departed, that went to El Salvador, and some of those details that the judge is asking for in trying to determine the timing. Clearly, the 5 named individuals were not deported
That's
in
right.
compliance, but looking more broadly, wanting to know about the timing of flights and so forth, because the verbal order did say turn around the flights if there's an issue. So is the administration prepared to provide that information?
I'm prepared to provide it right now. All of the planes that were subject to the written order, the judge's written order, took off before the order was entered in the courtroom on Saturday. And the administration will, of course, be happily answering all of those questions that the judge poses in court later today.
And for people who have due process questions about making certain that there wasn't anyone who was swept up who did not meet the criteria that you laid out, is there a way for the administration to provide more detail about how that was determined, who the individuals were that met this deportation order?
Yes, I can assure the American people that Customs and Border Patrol and ICE and the Department of Homeland Security are sure about the identities of the individuals who were on these planes.
Just trust us. Just trust us. We can't verify that legally anymore, and we didn't keep the paperwork. You just have to trust people who are known to make really good impartial decisions, ICE members. Not like courts, judges, juries, whatever, not even investigators, just like ICE, like those fat thumbs that you occasionally see on TV who gurgle into the microphone about how America is under attack by people who, statistically speaking, commit fewer crimes than native citizens.
The threat that they pose to our homeland. They take this incredibly seriously. They are putting their lives on the line to deport these designated terrorists from our country, and they should be trusted to do that. And that's exactly what the American people elected this president to do. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Just to follow up on that, then, so you're saying definitively that the administration can prove everyone.
This is the most set up question. No one would ever talk like this unless their administration or the question had been vetted by the administration beforehand. So, hold on now. Whoa. So let's be clear. So what you're saying is you can really prove all those people were members of Tren de Aragua? Jesus Christ, man.
Everyone that was put on those flights to El Salvador was either a member of Tren de Aragua, MS-13, or some other entity.
We've already provided the breakdown in the effort of transparency about the 261 illegal aliens who were deported. 137 of those were deported under the Alien Enemies Act. 101 of those were Venezuelans removed via Title VIII, which, as you know, are just regular immigration proceedings. And 23 of them were MS-13 Salvadorian gang members. There were also 2 MS-13 ringleaders as part of that group of 23 who President Bukele particularly expressed his gratitude for their return so he can demand justice in his home country. Jennifer.
What criteria, though, other than, say, tattoos or maybe being in the wrong place at the wrong time, are they using to determine that someone is actually a member of one of these organizations?
Intelligence and the men and women on the ground in the interior of our country who are finally being allowed to do their jobs. Their hands.
So not evidence then. Literally, like, and this is it's Gestapo shit. Really, it is. It's like the at the end of the day, guys, we may not have due process, but we do have one thing: trustworthy police officers. That's literally her argument here.
Hands were tied under the previous administration, and as I said, they take their jobs very seriously. They should be trusted and respected by the—
See, like, again, it's not even the respect thing. It's a part of it, or like it's the main part of it, because it's not about, like, have the cops done their job well, which, I mean, if they have, you should have paperwork to prove it. It's about veneration of the state. That's what fascism always comes down to, right? Like, the state is an apparatus to serve capital interests, the weaponization of the population in the service of the state interest, which is why cops stop being civil servants and start being, like, another caste of people. It happens in literally every nation that runs down this road, and it's been the case here in America for a long time. The veneration of the police, the bipartisan veneration of the police, has been a fascism warning signal for decades and decades and decades.
The American public with this operation. And of course, as I said to Kelly, the administration will provide all details to the questions that the court poses. Jennifer.
One more follow-up on that. Can you say how much the U.S. is paying El Salvador to imprison these Venezuelans? And then a different question on Russia. I was wondering if you could give us an update on the ceasefire negotiations, and is there anything you can share on the list that Putin passed along to President Trump for the things he's requesting?
Sure. To your first question, it was approximately $6 million to El Salvador for the detention of these foreign terrorists. And I would point out that is pennies on the dollar in comparison to the cost of life and the cost it would impose on the American taxpayer to house these terrorists in maximum security prisons here in the United States of America. And I would echo the message of our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who expressed his gratitude to President Bukele and El Salvador's government for their cooperation in this deal. As for Russia, as you know, the president announced last night on Air Force One on his return from his very busy weekend in Florida that he will be speaking to President Putin tomorrow. I won't get ahead of those negotiations, but I can say we are on the 10th yard line of peace, and we've never been closer to a peace deal than we are in this moment. And the president, as you know, is determined to get one done. Sure, Caitlin.
I have two questions for you. One on the flights, but first on the president's post overnight, saying that the pardons that were issued by President Biden preemptively to members of the January 6th committee, that they're now null and void. Have attorneys here at the White House told
we'll talk
President
about
Trump
that.
that he has the legal authority to undo a pardon simply because it was signed by auto pen, as he said?
The president was—
This is like such a stupid— here, hold on, we need like a cutaway on this because it's so stupid. Okay, here's a Truth Social post from Trump. The pardons that sleepy Joe Biden gave to the Unselect Committee of political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done by autopen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. He knew nothing about them, and the people that did may have committed a crime. Therefore, those on the Unselect Committee who destroyed and deleted all the evidence obtained during their 2-year witch hunt of me and so many other innocent people should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. The fact is, they were probably responsible for the documents that were signed on behalf without the knowledge or consent of the worst president in the history of our country, crooked Joe Biden, etc. Obviously, this is complete nonsense. The idea that signing a document via autopen means it's illegitimate, that's just made up. Not that it matters. Here's all of the January 6 pardons that were signed via autopen. And Donald Trump, everyone does this. You've done it with like medical documents. It's all like, it's just completely made up. That being said, because we don't live in a democracy anymore, Trump is probably just going to open up investigations into those people. They weren't even charged with crimes. Well, they will be, I assume.
Begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired. I know it took people some time to finally admit that, but we all know that to be true, as evidenced by his disastrous debate performance against President Trump during the campaign. I digress on that. But the president was raising the point that, did the president even know about these pardons?
The crazy thing is that, like, if good people ever take power again, they should, like, this level of contempt should be the bare minimum for what they express against the administration. Every liberal administration wants to heal after what came before it, and I don't want to, actually. I want to like forever, like this level of antagonism and animosity has to be reserved forever against them, you know?
His legal signature used without his consent or knowledge. And that's not just the president or me raising those questions, Caitlin. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents. And so I think it's a question that everybody in this room should be looking into, because certainly that would propose perhaps criminal or illegal behavior if staff members were signing the president of the United States autograph.
He has to say he can specifically void the pardons only because of the autopen, because otherwise he's opening himself up to having any future self-pardons voided as well. It doesn't, well, no, it doesn't matter, because he can break the law, but other people can't, right? Like that. No, and man, how many years have I said this? Like all of the liberal henpecking about, well, you can't do that because then they'll do that. And then Democrats did nothing and now Republicans are doing everything. I hate to be vindicated on this, you know?
Without his consent.
Biden is on the record talking about issuing preemptive pardons to these people.
But was he aware of his signature being used on every single pardon? That's a question you should ask the Biden White House.
But you can't go too hard against them, because then they'll be more vindictive against you. Dude, Merrick Garland basically gave Donald Trump a little kiss on the balls and a pat in the butt and let him go. And Donald Trump still took office pretending that he was like an arisen phoenix who barely survived an assassination attempt by Joe Biden himself, who will now enact like bloody vengeance against everyone who ever wronged him, which is literally everyone on the left.
On that he wasn't aware of it?
You're a reporter. You should find out.
Okay,
Sean.
on the flights, so I have a question on the timeline of the flights. You keep talking about the judge's written order, which hit the docket Saturday night at about 7:26 p.m., but he issued a verbal order before that at about 6:45 and 6:48 p.m. based on the court hearing. A verbal order from the bench. Does the White House feel the need to comply with a verbal order from this judge?
Again, as I said, all of the
I wonder when we're going to drop this artifice and stop arguing about whether or not the Trump administration is openly defying court orders, when they've already said that they are openly defying court orders and don't care about them. They've already done this multiple times. Like Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, and Trump have all essentially said the judges shouldn't be allowed to contest me. That's illegal. Trump literally said that in his speech at the Justice Department. Like, when judges stand against me, that is illegal. He said, like, what are we still talking about here? What's with the artifice? Why are we pretending? Who cares?
Subject to the written order of this judge, departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
But what about the verbal order, which of course carries the same legal weight as a written order, and said for the planes to turn around if they were
Well,
in the air?
there's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order, as a written order, and our lawyers are determined to ask and answer those questions in court.
There's not, but it doesn't really matter, I guess.
Sean.
Hey, so on Friday, the president suggested at length that it should be illegal to criticize judges, but he has repeatedly criticized judges who rule against him, and Elon Musk is calling for impeachment of judges who have opposed the administration. So how are those two things not in conflict?
I have not heard the president talk about impeaching judges. I know you mentioned Mr. Musk's tweet, but I have not heard the president of the United States ask that.
I mean, the president said that it should be illegal. So that's more than suggesting they should be impeached.
Mary.
Yeah, you're going in the oubliette, buddy.
I wanted to ask about this video I saw this morning set to the tune of, I believe, Closing Time about deportations of illegal migrants. What's the strategy behind the White House's videos they've been putting out on this, and can you kind of talk us through the thinking on these videos?
Sure. I think the White House and our entire government clearly is leaning into the message of this president. And we are unafraid to double down and to take responsibility and ownership of the serious decisions that are being made. The president was elected with an overwhelming mandate to launch the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and that's exactly what he is doing. And to this very day, we are now, I think, 56 or 7 days into the administration by my count. The president still receives an overwhelming public support for the policies that he is enacting. So we are unafraid.
He doesn't. That's just not true. It's not like it matters, I guess. I think I saw that earlier today, there was polling information released that indicated that immigration was no longer the number one concern for American voters, that it had moved over to economic concerns that are being worsened by Trump's trade wars. If someone could find that for me.
To message effectively what the president is doing on a daily basis to make our communities safer. And the specific video you referenced, I think it sums up our immigration policy pretty well. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions. First, will President Trump put sanctions on Russia if the talks on Tuesday don't go as hoped? And secondly, have any illegal immigrants self-deported through CBP home yet?
To your first question, it's something the president has floated, and certainly he's willing to do if necessary. I don't have anything to read out, and I would never get ahead of the president on such a serious decision. To your second question about the CBP Home app, I would have to check in with the Department of Homeland Security, but it's a great question, and we're very proud to repurpose this app, which the Biden administration abused to facilitate the mass illegal entry of illegal immigrants into our country. It was like a fast pass at Disneyland. That's not happening under this administration. We are encouraging illegal immigrants to actively self-deport to maybe save themselves from being in one of these fun videos.
Caroline.
Sure. John, good to see you.
After President Trump strafe-bombed the Houthis yesterday, he said that if they retaliate, he was going to personally hold Iran accountable for that. Holding them accountable, what would that look like?
Well, I would defer you to what the president put out this morning, John, where he said very clearly, I will read it, "Let nobody be fooled. The hundreds of attacks being made by Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen, who are hated by the Yemeni people, are all created by Iran. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force, and there is no guarantee that the force will stop there. Iran has played the innocent victim of rogue terrorists from which they've lost control, but they haven't lost control. They are dictating every move, giving them the weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment, and even so-called intelligence. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran. And Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire."
They're basically saying they're getting ready to strike Iran. I mean, yeah, why not, right? We need to keep the indefinite war effort going. You have Israel, but it's difficult to justify continuing to send money to Israel when the Gaza Strip has been completely paved over. So you've got Ukraine, but obviously we're a pro-Russian country now, so we don't want to continue funneling money into Ukraine. Got to go for Iran next. Always has to be something.
That is a statement from the President of the United States just moments ago. I have nothing additional to share, but our message to Iran is you better take this president seriously, and I think the Houthis learned that the hard way this past weekend. As I said in my opening remarks, there's a new sheriff in town, and this president is not just going to sit on his hands and allow terrorists to launch attacks on commercial vessels and U.S. naval ships. Those actions will not be tolerated. Sure, Edward.
Yeah, thanks. Caroline, on the economy. So after mostly a down week last week in the economy, you've been very vocal as well as other cabinet members about how we're in a transition and about how.
Oh my God, our glazing is so annoying. It's not glazing. It's a fascist administration. You know that, right? Like if you were watching like Russian state TV or something like that, or like Uzbekistani or like North Korean, you would like you're personalizing it too much. Like they're part of a single apparatus, right? They might all individually be self-serving grifters, but the unified interest of the administration is extremely clear at this point.
This economic transition, and there's a plan, a long-term plan for tariffs on this. How concerned is the president that the markets and Americans, for lack of a better term, will freak out over these tariffs and be concerned about a long-term plan?
Sure. I think I've been asked this question and answered this question respectfully, Edward. We are in a period of transition. The president has made that clear. He also has made his belief in tariffs and what they will do for our great country clear, restoring wealth back to our country. And if you look at the president's first-term economic formula, massive deregulation, tax cuts, lowering the cost of living with an energy boom, which the American people can expect soon.
Oh, yeah.
Wall Street and Main Street should both be assured by what President Trump did in his first term. It's the exact same formula. In fact, I would argue it's even better this time around. And if you look at some of the economic indicators in the last week, the latest CPI report last week beat expectations. Inflation is cooling. Core inflation dropped for the first time in 4 months. The national average of the price of gas is down 42 cents from 1 year ago. And there was also a new report out this morning about wholesale egg prices. They continue to fall.
So to be clear, the reason why inflation went down is probably due to slower or lower consumer demand. As for gasoline prices, comparing it to 1 year ago seems kind of odd. Like, circumstances are pretty different to 1 year ago. We're not looking at things month over month. But the reason why egg prices went down was because of lower demand. Basically, eggs got so expensive that people just stopped buying them. They got used to no longer being able to afford them. So when demand drops, so does the price. All of these, like, the real thing that we're looking for is the consumer, like at the end of Q1, like the overall degree of consumer participation, you know? And I mean, those numbers are going to be interesting, right? We want to see where the GDP goes. We want to see how much people are spending, because I have a feeling it's not going to look good.
A dozen eggs are now $3.10 cheaper since January 24th. First, that's a 47% decrease overall. So I think the American people.
I mean, you can go check your local grocery store and see if that's true, by the way. You can just go check. It's fine.
You have great reason to be optimistic about this economy. And as I've said repeatedly, it continues to be true. The administration has a whole of government effort to fix the economic mess created by Biden.
So the president's pointed to that April 2nd tariff deadline, so to speak. Is the tariff back and forth sort of done now? We're just all looking towards April 2nd?
Well, I think the president would tell you that all options are always on the table, and he's always ready to respond if he feels the United States is being unfairly treated by our allies and also our competitors around the world. But yes, the April 2nd day is a big day for the country, as the president has said. Reciprocal tariffs will go into effect. We'll have more details on that as the date nears, but our entire trade team, Secretary Lutnick, Secretary Bessent, the vice president has been quite involved in these talks and discussions as well about what that will look like. And the president, as you always do, you will hear from him directly on it. Deborah Saunders, how are you?
Fine. How are you doing, Karen?
Good, thanks.
Former pardon attorney Elizabeth Boyer believes she was fired for refusing to sign off on a move to restore gun rights to actor Mel Gibson. DOJ's Todd Blanche says no. But I want to know, is the administration dedicated to restoring gun rights?
The eggs here at the local co-op are $5 a dozen. It's because they've already sourced them locally for a long time. Well, then it could just be a matter of like the bird flu hasn't hit those eggs yet. Like those farms they get those eggs from just haven't been hit by the broader spread. It's also possible they're selling them at a loss. A lot of grocery stores are selling eggs at a loss. Like they're selling them for less than they took to buy them. You know?
The felons have served their times. I asked this because I've talked to people who were pardoned. They felt that was important. Of course, this isn't necessarily for a pardon. What is the president's thinking on this issue?
Sure.
After you've served your sentence, should you have gun rights?
It's an important question. It is one I have not spoken to the president.
Sorry, I was half paying attention. Was she asking whether or not gun rights should be restored to J6 insurrectionists who have been pardoned by Trump? I think that's what she asked.
About on his views, but I will take it to him this afternoon. I will tell him you asked, and we will get you an answer.
Okay.
You're welcome. Jonathan.
Thanks a lot, Carolina. A question for you regarding the administration complying with judges' orders. I want to ask about an administration spokesperson who's the borders czar, Tom Homan. He was on Fox News.
We love Tom Homan.
And he was talking about the deportations, and he said the following. He said, "We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think," which seems to me, just reading that, that you don't care what orders come from the federal bench. Is that the case? Can you clarify that, please?
Well, I think since you just quoted Tom, I'll quote Tom. He said, "I don't care what the judges think, but I can assure you that the administration is complying with the court order. And as I've said repeatedly from this podium, all of the flights that were subject to the judge's written order departed before the written order, and we are prepared to make that case in court later this afternoon." Reagan.
And then if I could, on Russia, the president, as you pointed out, Caroline, made some remarks on Air Force One coming back from Florida, and he seemed to indicate that the conversation tomorrow concerns essentially dividing up assets, dividing up territory associated with the war in Ukraine. Has President Zelensky given President Trump that authority? Is that what is going to take place tomorrow?
Well, as you know, the president and his entire national security team have been engaged directly with President Zelensky and the Ukrainian team, and that has been part of the discussion between the president's team and the Ukrainians. As for where those lines will be drawn or any specifics, I am not going to get into that from this podium. It would be unwise for me to get ahead of the president's call with President Putin tomorrow. But again, I can assure you, in the effort of transparency, as this president always does, you will hear from him or one of us directly after that phone call tomorrow. Reagan.
Thank you, Caroline. There's a lot
And
of
we'll
focus
see
on
how
the
that
judicial
goes.
branch right now. The president has about 40 judicial appointments that he could make at this moment. Do you have an update on what the timeline would look like for those judicial appointments? And does the president have a list of potential nominees that he's vetting?
I do not have an update on a timeline, nor do I have a list, but I can certainly have our team gather that for you and provide it.
Chad calling her stupid when she's successfully faking transparency in a way the Democrats never could. Yeah, I guess I just feel a little bit uncomfortable lambasting her for a lack of intelligence when so far she's doing a better job than any Democrat I've ever seen up here, or anyone, actually. I mean, the job of the press secretary is to be transparent and to promote the administration. Now, no press secretary has actually been transparent because every president has been a lying piece of shit, at least in my lifetime. Psaki was good? No, she wasn't. She is, however, phenomenal at lauding the administration. So if there are two goals that you're trying to achieve, no one's done one of them. She's doing this one better than anyone else, by far. So
you're welcome. Sure. Go ahead. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline.
Go
So
ahead.
the president is visiting the Kennedy Center this afternoon to
He
attend
is.
a board meeting. A question about what happened a few weeks ago. The Kennedy Center got bomb threats targeting a performance by Shingyun Performing Arts, which is an American company showcasing China before communism. This company has been targeted, unfortunately, by the CCP for years. I'm wondering if this administration has a response to this, and also as the president is putting an emphasis on arts and culture.
she's asking if Trump will protect the Falun Gong religious cult theater performance from China or something like that.
What's the administration's message to potentially foreign state actors who are trying to disrupt that in the U.S.?
Don't disrupt it. This administration will take that very seriously and hold you accountable. We obviously condemn any violence or threats of violence against American institutions. And the president will be traveling to the Kennedy Center later this afternoon. I look forward to going with him. As you know, he is now the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center, where he hopes to restore arts.
It's kind of hard to rate her laundering questions with her laundering abilities when the questions are vetted. Hey man, look, just to be clear, like in a glorious socialist presidency, I also think that OAN dipshit should be kicked out of the press corps, you know? It was always like a fault. Like the problem is the Democrats have nothing to stand by. Republicans can stand by evil, so they defend evil. They have something to defend, something to talk about. We keep that quiet. No, we don't. What? Just because somebody gets press credentials just because like they have like what's Alex Jones be there? No, f that. Absolutely not. Democrats have never been strong enough when it comes to defending their administrations, largely because they have nothing to really defend. I mean, I admit they could have been a lot more militant about stuff like COVID protections or the Inflation Reduction Act. Like there are a lot of things that Democrats could have been more militant on. But overall, like, what are you going to be militant on if you're defending Biden's administration? Like, what are you going to go up there as a press secretary, plant your feet in the ground for, and go like, no, actually, we're not moving from this. This is the line we draw. Like, on what? You're not doing shit, you know?
In culture that embrace American tradition, don't disparage it, as we have unfortunately seen over the past several years. The president will be doing a tour of the center. In his business developer mind, I'm sure he will make some recommendations on how the center itself can be improved, but also will be discussing perhaps some future plays and musicals and theatrical programs that the center will be hosting under his new leadership and the board's new leadership. Daniel.
Will the president be discussing with Putin tomorrow the future of Volodymyr Zelensky? Sort of a follow-up to John's question.
Again,
Will the president be discussing with Putin the future of Zelensky?
I've been asked and answered this question now. I'm not going to get ahead of the president's discussion tomorrow, but after the phone call takes place, I can certainly provide a readout. Daniel.
Caroline, thank you so much. You mentioned earlier in the briefing that you guys are at the 10-yard line. Given the amount of progress that you've made in such a short amount of time, is that an indictment of the previous administration's foreign?
Yeah, though I will admit it would be nice if you were a Democratic press secretary to have left-leaning news media tee you up like this. You know what I mean? Like, that would be nice. And you could do that, by the way, by investing in media. You know, Democrats spend billions on ad reads. They don't invest meaningfully in, like, building a, decentralized news network.
Policy stance, and is it just more proof that you need to talk to people to sort of get things done?
I think so. I think the previous administration is the reason this war began. As President Trump often says, this war would have never started if he were still in office. It only started because of the incompetence and the weakness of the previous administration. And President Trump is very proud of the progress that he and his team have made in such a short amount of time. And hopefully tomorrow that progress will move forward. Sure.
Thanks. There have been some media reports just in the last few hours that the administration has decided to withdraw from the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine, which is designed to hold Putin accountable for war crimes. Are you able to confirm that? And if that has occurred, why has that occurred?
I'm not able to confirm it because I have not heard that. I will caution, I know there have been many inaccurate and misleading reports from Reuters lately, so I would caution anybody taking that seriously. But
See, she's pretty good. She's pretty good.
Rachel.
You know?
Is it the president's belief that the Justice Department should be investigating members of the January 6th Select Committee? Is he directing the DOJ to do that?
As the president made it very clear in his address on Friday, I believe some of you were there, I was there, he made his vision for what he would like to see of the Department of Justice very clear, but he said that he has appointed great people in Attorney General Pam Bondi and also in our FBI Director, Cash.
You don't got to hand it to her, actually. No, I'm just saying you need to identify, like, how this is happening, because I think a lot of liberals, they just roll their eyes and they're like, they're lying. It's like, yeah, they are lying, but they're also, like, building and maintaining a very sophisticated network of propaganda distribution. They're very consistent and very disciplined in their messaging. Like the fact that every Republican always knows what the line of the president is. The fact that Trump is basically on video like 3 hours a day, which Biden could never manage, even though they're the same age, basically. Like there's a lot going on here that people should be taking notes from. It's just unfortunate because, like, at the end of the day, if you're a fascist, you get the corporate backing to be the strongest version of yourself. And if you're a leftist, you don't. So
to do what they think is best for our justice system and to stop the weaponization of justice that we saw under the previous administration against not just President Trump, but his supporters as well. We want to...
It's sophisticated if you're uneducated. You misunderstand me. I'm not saying it's sophisticated in that the lies are sophisticated. I'm saying the network control they've maintained is sophisticated, which is true. I don't know if you've noticed, but they own everything. Everything. We get neutral messaging from AP, and Reuters. No one watches or cares about MSNBC, but everything to the right of that, New York Times, CNN, whatever, everything to the right, blitzed in far-right collaborationism, in centrists, or people masquerading as centrists who work for them, who write their articles, who edit for them, capital interests like on all sides, independent media like Joe Rogan, Theo Von, whatever the incorporated, paid off, fully compliant with the administration. Like, we're talking about, Vosh, I have no idea why you think this is anything other than a lame ass regurgitation of the same nonsense over and over. Honestly, it just might be going over your head a little bit. Like, basically, you are being fooled by fake simplicity. Like, you are looking at a expertly crafted children's toy, and you're saying, this is for kids, so it's stupid. But you don't understand how much thought has gone into it. You're watching Coco Melon, and you're like, this is like for tiny baby brains, not for me. Which is true. But Coco Melon was created by like a team of behavioral scientists and designed very intelligently to captivate young people in the way that it has. You have to understand like the machinery. Like you think you're smarter than them because you don't fall for the lies. Okay, but if you're so smart, why are they winning? Why, if you're so smart, why have they created the media engine that won over the public? Oh boy, Vosh has dug himself into a stupid point again. I genuinely don't understand what the like reflexive snarkiness is. I know that it's a difficult time to feel disempowered. I don't know why you're taking out on me. Isn't there like a dog you'd rather be kicking? I don't get it. I don't understand. Basically, what I'm saying is that I'm a birthday boy and I'm wearing glasses, and I don't understand why you're treating me this way. You're resistant to the point because you don't want to acknowledge that this infuriating woman has won and you have lost. And I have lost. But I have strength of character. I can acknowledge that as much as it hurts. You can't. You have to delude yourself into thinking that this is all happenstance. And it's one of the reasons why liberals don't win. Because they see stuff like this and they go, oh, people are just stupid. There's nothing for me to learn here. I have nothing to learn from the overwhelming victory of the opposition. Vosh, no, anyone can lie effortlessly. This isn't some masterclass. Kid Engine, respectfully, you might actually just be too stupid to understand the point. And I don't think that's like an innate thing. I think you can learn out of it. I would like to believe it's just you being reflexively defiant. Like you just don't like the idea that you've misunderstood the point. So you're being kind of belligerent about it. This isn't a matter of, like, you really think that's what this is? This entire victory of the right-wing media apparatus is just one person lying effortlessly? You have to listen to what I'm saying, man. Like, you can't, the right wins because Americans are stupid. Americans aren't any more or less stupid than people of any other country. Do you know how bad the political dynamic is right now in France, Germany, Italy, Greece, Romania, Hungary? Do you have any idea? What about the Russians? Is just everyone on Earth just? I mean, I guess everyone is stupid if you want to do it in the kind of like you know, misanthropic, like, oh, haha. But you have to admit then you're stupid as well. I'll take the bullet. I'll say I'm stupid, you know? Basically what I'm saying is that I want you guys to understand why we lost so that we can be better in the future. And if you're looking for cope, like, oh, Americans are just stupid, or oh, they're just lying, that's not impressive, you're not learning the lesson and you're going to lose again. That's the problem I have. This isn't like a humiliation ritual. This isn't about like everyone feel bad. I know you're personally not responsible for what's happening right now, but you have to acknowledge why it's happening. Total media control. It's very impressive. Definitely helps when the capital class is not innately hostile towards your goals. You can't just call them evil. You have to know what makes them tick. Yeah, Americans are stupider because of material conditions. I'm so sorry. I know that like I know people like strong contrast. So they like to oscillate between performative American supremacy and performative American diabolism. The truth is that people everywhere are basically all the same. And if you think the average American is less politically educated than the average person in the Balkans or Central Europe or Africa or Central Asia or Iran, you're just, I'm sorry, man. At the end of the day, we've got the same goop up here. Circumstances kind of push and pull us in different directions. And I will say that Americans are more sloppish and pig fat than other people, whatever that means to you. But we're pretty much all the same. You gotta get over that. We're louder. I'll say that. We aren't even louder, lol. Well, depends on what you're comparing us to, I guess. But, you know, isn't that a little bit liberating to recognize that it's not about any group of people having an innate disposition towards political on education, but rather that we're all essentially the same, and it's really just, you know, like different circumstances pushing and pulling. I would say the thing that makes America distinct is that there's more capital in this country than anywhere else. There's no country in the world that has as much money circulating. So because there's so much money circulating, so much like venture capital, so much investment, so much yada, 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 I think that that leads to specific kinds of brain damage caused by very like profit driven conditions or pushes or whatever, you know, by material conditions. Well, I'm trying to find a way to say it without saying the same two words over and over, but yeah. The stupidity of Greek politics would make your head spin. Americans are the same as us. They lack community ties in a lot of places, though. That's true. We are less community driven, for sure. At least white Americans, for sure. But for sure, yeah, Richard Henney, 100%. I agree. Yeah, like I get glimpses every once in a while of what things are what things are like in like Romania, and it's like, oh my God, for a moment, like the difference in America is that the stakes are higher, like way higher in America than they are in Romania, because we're America. But if you like took the average Romanian and made 330 million of them and replaced all of America with them, I don't think that people would suddenly be acting more politically educated. I think that you might see the opposite pattern, actually. Not innately, not for any innate reason, but just because, like, you know, different circumstances. You're comparing us with Romania? Well, Romania has human beings in it, and America has human beings in it. So since I'm making the point that we're not innately stupider than other countries, and that we're all basically the same in, like, a fundamental sense, I feel we're kind of doing a human-by-human comparison. Do you want me to choose, like, Mongolia or Turkmenistan? I could do either. I don't know as much about Mongolian politics, though. I think they're just chilling. I think in Mongolia, they're actually just chilling. I could be wrong on that, though. Anyway, it's the point that I made, you know. You are less educated than the French, for example, though no. You mean me specifically, or like Americans? I don't know, maybe. But like, I imagine that the average Ugandan is probably less educated than the average American. But I would say that if you like shook the dust off anyone from any country, and you were like, hey, listen, here's a new country with new politics, I think that people are generally going to be like pretty fucking stupid. I think people have the potential to be really intelligent when they're kind of like organized through a collective labor movement. Like, I think that some of the most politically educated proletariat you would have ever seen would have been in the Soviet bloc countries back in the 1950s and 60s, or in countries affiliated with them. I bet you the average Cuban in like 1973 could dog walk the average American today in terms of just understanding what's going on. And that's because as bad as the Soviet states and their affiliates were, they were very, in some respects, very good at providing a kind of political education that I think is a lot more instructive than the ones that we give today. Material conditions, et cetera, et cetera. Not a defense of the Soviet Union, but there were, I think, and you can see this, by the way, because you can see grainy old, like, videos or documentaries of Soviet exchange students who are, like, talking about political education, and at the same time that the most radical thing you saw in American universities was hippies burning their bras and, like, doing LSD or whatever, you had, like, Soviet students, who dressed better, by the way, who were, like, laying out thorough critiques of you know, the capitalist superstructure. And you know, I think basically it's just a matter of like building a system that kind of provides that political education. Well, anyway, sorry.
Restore the Department of Justice to an institution that focuses on fighting law and order and crime and putting real criminals behind bars, not targeting Americans because of their religion or their political speech. We saw that under the previous administration, and it's unacceptable to this president.
And just to follow up really quickly on just Homan's comments from earlier, a few weeks ago in the Oval Office, the president said he will always abide by the courts. We heard what Tom Homan said earlier today. So I'm only asking just to be clear for the American people. It is the administration's belief that
they are fighting law and order. That is true.
We're bound to comply by the judge's orders?
We are complying with the judge's orders.
Question on the storm.
Sure.
What role does the president see for FEMA with these storms? He's talking about getting rid of FEMA.
The stuff I learned in my high school American government class would not be able to account for what's happening now. I think that's a really good way of thinking about it, actually. I think that if you're provided a basic Marxist education, what's happening in the United States now is comprehensible. Difficult to grapple with. Scary, but comprehensible. Whereas the typical liberal-oriented education that you get of like the American political, like, you know, we're founded on liberty and justice and the founding fathers gave us the Constitution and civics and so on and so forth. All of this is just incomprehensible. It makes no sense. And I think that's one of the reasons why people defer to these like lazy responses of like, oh, well, people are just stupid and that's why it fell apart. And it's like, well, you know, I think the average American was probably stupider back in like 1802 when women couldn't vote, slavery, Jim Crow later, so on and so forth. Like, I think probably today people are on smarter average, and the IQ scores back me up on that one. So why are things changing? It's not that people are getting stupider, they're getting smarter, and that's a fact, a verifiable fact, the Flynn effect. So why this? Well, it doesn't have much to do with stupidity, to be honest with you.
Handling their own disasters. Does he plan to change how the federal government responds to these storms?
There hasn't been a change yet. That doesn't mean there couldn't be in the future. But as of right now, the president, the entire administration are actively monitoring the storms, as I said. In fact, before I came down here, there was an email note in my inbox from the Department of Homeland Security on what they are actually doing state by state across the board. So rest assured, Secretary Noem and her team is on it, and I would defer you to the Department of Homeland Security for any further details.
One more question. The president referenced power plants with a conversation with Vladimir Putin. What is he referring to with power plants? What is that?
There's a power plant that is on the border of Russia and Ukraine that was up for discussion with the Ukrainians, and he will...
IQ is not a real indicator of intelligence. I don't know. Guys, you don't need to fall on the sword like this. You know IQ is real, right? It doesn't measure general intelligence or innate intelligence, but it's a thing. I don't know why. Like, this would be like somebody saying, like, the average number of push-ups people can do has been going down over time, and people are like, well, that's not that push-ups aren't indicative of physical fitness. And it's like, I mean, they are. They're not entirely indicative. Like, there's still other muscles that you have to train. but that, you know, there is an association. You can study for an IQ test, though. Yeah, that's why I said it's not a measure of innate intelligence. Vosh, please, let's not do this. Please don't die on this hill. Why are you? You're so annoying. Why do you talk like that? Who trained you to talk? You don't talk like that in your day-to-day life, right? Where like somebody says something to you that you disagree with, and you're like, bro, please, don't do this. Like, why are you so fucking patronizing? You taught us? Dad, I learned it from you. Is it really fun to be patronizing? I think you got to do a bit of push and pull, right? Like, patronizing on its own isn't enough. You have to like pull people back in. You have to be like, listen, I just want us to get along. That kind of thing, you know?
Address it in his call with Putin tomorrow.
The nuclear plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Caroline?
Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you if you would be releasing more granular data about the people who were sent to El Salvador this week.
Nope. Sorry, they've been disappeared.
Particularly, will you be releasing their names?
I don't believe so because of the...
Not even their names. Not even their names. Jesus, dude. You know, any one of you could be sent there with, like, no... Like, you could literally just be snatched out of your home or off the street and be sent over, and you never existed. Like, to everyone else, you would have just disappeared. The government wouldn't tell your family where you'd gone. It's not like you get a chance to call home from the El Salvadoran super prison. You would just, like, rot in there forever. Not even a statistic.
Privacy concerns at this point in time. That doesn't mean we won't eventually. I would defer you to the Department of Homeland Security for more details on the individuals on the flights, but we have been incredibly transparent in giving you the breakdown of the numbers and also some of the crimes committed by these heinous criminals and individuals: kidnapping,
Unnamed.
sexual abuse of a child, robbery, aggravated assault on a police officer.
But by not providing their names, we literally can't even verify any of this. It's not even possible to verify any of those claims.
I would remind everybody in this room that Tren de Aragua is a foreign terrorist organization operating within the United States of America because the previous administration allowed them to invade our country. These are monsters who tortured, raped, and murdered a 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungre. They murdered 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley. They led a multi-state sex trafficking operation involving smuggling women into the United States, holding them in stash houses in Louisiana, Florida, New Jersey, Texas, and Virginia, and forcing them into prostitution. And they kidnapped and murdered a 33...
Again, just a reminder to anyone who wants to be bad faith about this. If all these things are true, you could have deported them without invoking the Alien Enemies Act. Because if you prove these things in court, that the people who did this, you can deport them. You can deport them. Trust me. If you find legal evidence of an undocumented immigrant who has engaged in sex trafficking, you can deport them. You don't need to invoke any Alien Enemies Act. I promise you. Totally unnecessary. Literally, the argument here is like, we don't need habeas corpus. Trust your police officers, which, I'm sorry, I just don't.
3-year-old woman in Texas. They sexually and physically assaulted a woman and her daughter in Wisconsin. They conducted a mass shooting in Illinois. They peddled untraceable ghost guns across New York.
There are going to be cops investigating missing person cases with no way of knowing they were taken by ICE. Oh, 100%, yeah. ICE won't even keep records of who they disappear. So there are going to be people like, hey, what happened to my father? My father's gone. And the cops are going to have no way of knowing. As if cops do any real work. Yeah, but it's still kind of like nightmarish,
York City took over an Aurora, Colorado apartment complex where they kidnapped and tortured victims. And by the way, many of you in the
I didn't know. Oh, has that been added to the claims list? The Aurora apartments that they took over, that the mayor said they didn't take over, and the Aurora Police Department said they didn't take over. They were also using them as like staging grounds for all that. That's crazy.
Mainstream media said that didn't happen. It turned out that it did. And because of the effective immigration policies of this administration, those foreign terrorists were detained and they are no longer operating on American soil. And we have President Trump to thank for that. We'll see you guys later at the Kennedy Center. Thanks so much.
That's great. Good night, y'all.